everyone, welcome back to my channel, and boy do I have a team for you guys today. This video is going to get straight to the point. I'm going to be showing you guys a very strong team. This team is super consistent and I've been running this team for the past couple of days and it has been performing way too well. I know we're coming close to the end of the first week of Ultra League, but when Ultra League comes back, you could definitely run this team. Maybe save up those XLs for that Steelix if you're able to build one. I know this team is very XL heavy because you have the Gradient, which is fully XL, and you have the Steelix, which is also fully XL. But if you have the resources for it, I highly recommend it. I managed to hit Veteran with this team pretty early on in the season. So the team is going to be Gliscor, Gradient Safe Swap, and Steelix in the back. In terms of how the team works, it's very simple. You have the Gliscor on the lead, which can take care of fighters and also take care of water types like Swampert and Tapu Fini, and you have Gradient on the Safe Swap to draw out fighters. That way Steelix in the back has the potential to sweep. I usually like to shield Gliscor because I actually think Gliscor is the most valuable member of the team. The two Pokemon in the back are pretty bulky, so they don't need shields as much as Gliscor needs it. Also, sometimes you might get like a water type in the front, but you haven't been able to draw out the fighter, so it's good to keep the Gliscor healthy in case your opponent is running a water lead and a fighter in the back, or vice versa, a fighter in the lead and then a water type in the back. I found that Gradient made a really excellent pivot and generalist because it has so much coverage for the meta. Also, its spamminess gives it the potential to flip switch in your favor. Also, Gradient is neutral to Gliscor's hardest counters like flyers and electric types, so I found that if I see those in the lead, I can easily swap into Gradient and I would be in a good position. But that's enough rambling from me. You guys came here to see some battles and I am going to show you guys some battles. Oh, and I should mention first, most of your games will go into timeout with this team, so if you're gonna run it, please be patient. You have to have some patience, and I'm sorry. Okay, the first game I'm gonna show you guys is actually from the previous set before I hit Veteran. It was the last game in that set, and I found my opponent's strategy very interesting. That's why I'm showing this game off. I actually faced this opponent's team before and I recognized what his strategy was immediately, and it'll show off in how I play it. However, I still end up losing. My opponent is trying to run a team that goes into timeout, and then he tries to keep all three of his Pokemon alive and tries to win it by going into timeout. So that's the first game that I'm going to show you guys, and it was painful. But I respect the patience and I respect the dedication to running this team. Unfortunately, this is the path that Ultra League is going down, where most of the Pokemon are becoming super bulky and you're just trying to outbulk your opponent's team. So as you saw, my opponent led Cresselia, and then he brought in Mandibuzz on his swap. And what my opponent is going to try to do is he's going to try to stall out the match as much as possible, and he's going to try to keep each one of his Pokemon alive. If he has 3 Pokemon alive in the end and I only have 2, then I lose. And I'm going to spoil it for you guys. I do lose in the end. So right now I have my Steelix into his Mandibuzz, and my opponent is going to try to wait out his timer and swap out into his Cresselia before I manage to KO Mandibuzz. Now my opponent again is just looking to stall out the switch timer as much as possible. Again, he doesn't want to lose a single Pokemon on his team. I'm down 1 Pokemon. My Gradient died to his Mandibuzz, so I'm at a disadvantage here. So what I do is, before my opponent can do more damage to Steelix, I swap in my Gliscor, and I recognize that I need to take out this Cresselia if I want a chance at winning. And my opponent is going to double shield here because he has to keep it alive. So I throw 2 aerial aces, they take both his shields, and now my opponent is going to throw a move against my Gliscor. I'm going to let the Grass Knot go because my opponent is debuffed. They were debuffed by the Steelix before. And I know that my opponent is going to bring in Defense Deoxys, and look at that. The timer is already up and there is nothing I can do. I have 2 Pokemon left and my opponent has 3, so they're going to take that win and win on timeout. But GG's to my opponent. I have to hand it to you. It is a clever strat. It's definitely a strategy. And if you're playing it well, and my opponent played it really well, it's gonna work. But on to the set where I get the 5-0, that takes me into Veteran. I do start off at, I think it's 2438, and the 5-0 is enough to take us right over 2,500. Anyways, first on the lead, we have an awful lead for Gliscor. We see Registeel, and my team actually doesn't deal that well with Registeel. It's going to be a team effort. What I usually like to do is I'll stay in with Gliscor and I'll throw the liquidations because they are neutral and they have a chance to drop my opponent's defense. Unfortunately, we're not getting a defense drop in this match. I'll shield the first Zap Cannon and then I'll try to catch the second one on Steelix, which I managed to do successfully. Now I'm going to go for these Breaking Swipes against Registeel, although I probably should have built up to the Earthquake, but the problem is my opponent will outpace me to the Focus Blasts, and I just wanted to try to get him out of the way, so I was going to spam Breaking Swipes at my opponent and hopefully knock him out with those Breaking Swipes. I did invest my second shield to shield Steelix, and I'm so glad I did because then my opponent brought out Giratina Altered. And after I saw what my opponent had in the back, I actually don't know why they did this. Giratina is actually very hard countered by Steelix. Steelix walls Giratina almost, especially if it's not running Shadow Sneak. At about when my opponent reached a third of his health, I decided to go for a full farm down because I recognized that I would need this energy for Registeel, because Registeel can still reach a Focus Blast. So I had 2 Breaking Swipes for Registeel. I'm going to see if my opponent decides to shield. My opponent decided to shield one of these Breaking Swipes. So I have an idea that maybe what he has in the back is weak to Steelix, but I decide to let my Steelix go and farm down with Greedent, and that was the right choice to make. My opponent brings in Mandibuzz and I'm ahead on energy, and this thing is super spammy. Now I'm just going for these body slams and I almost have 3 ready, and 3 of these already put the Mandibuzz into the yellow below half health. So that's really good for us. And something happens here. I realize that I'm down, by the way, 2 shields, so I have no shields left. My opponent, if he gets me lower than his health, he can win the game because we both have 2 Pokemon left. So I recognize this, and in the last second before the timer times out, I swap into Gliscor because my Gliscor is a lot healthier than my Greedent, and I take that win. It felt like an awful move, but I had to do it. I'm so sorry to my opponents. Alright, on to the next game. We have an amazing lead. We see Poliwrath into Gliscor. Gliscor absolutely walls Poliwrath. There is nothing that the Poliwrath can throw against us that is going to be neutral or super effective. They immediately swap into Shadow Drapion and I bring out Steelix. Now the match can get a little tricky if my opponent has Aqua Tail, which in this match he did not have. And if my opponent gets defense drops on the crunches, because then I would have to invest a shield to win this switch. We get lucky this time and we don't get any defense drops. I'm easily able to take 3 crunches, and then I have residual energy that I can throw against the Poliwrath when it comes back. And also I let my opponent get me low enough to where my opponent's Poliwrath cannot get too much farm on me. After they take out our Steelix, I immediately bring back in Gliscor, and my opponent immediately swaps into Skuntank. Now what I want to do is, my opponent had 2 shields left and I wanted to take out one of their shields, so I threw an Aerial Ace on my Gliscor, sort of as a bait, expecting them to shield, and it did the job. It got one of his shields, and now I can bring in Greedent, which is so spammy. There's not enough shields in the world to shield the number of body slams that this thing can throw. Aw, it's so cute and so evil at the same time. So we managed to take out the Skuntank with Greedent, and my switch timer is up, so I am immediately going to bring in Gliscor so that my opponent's Poliwrath can't farm any more energy, and I can easily reach 2 Aerial Aces. Poliwrath is quite bulky, so it is going to take 2 to take it out. And we take that win. GG's to my opponent. You guys could see in that match just how powerful Greedent is. Do not sleep on that Pokemon. If you have it, make it. Alright, moving on to the next match, we have Tapu Fini on the lead, which is actually a decent lead for us, not too bad. This is why I run Aerial Ace and not X-Scissor. The way I like to play this lead is I'll stay in, I'll throw all these Aerial Aces at this Tapu Fini. The Tapu Fini will usually throw immediately as it gets to Moonblast, so what I'll do is I'll always shield if it's a Moonblast. even if my opponent attempts to bait, I'm still gonna go for the shield. Usually my opponents have been throwing the Moonblast first. They almost never bait. And if Tapu Fini invests one shield, they can reach a second Moonblast, kind of like how this Tapu Fini has reached a second Moonblast. So I do end up investing both of my shields, but like I said, I think Gliscor is one of the most important Pokemon on this team. Now my opponent brings in Gliscor, so I go for the liquidation and I take his final shield, and then I manage to catch the Night Slash on Greedent. Then my opponent swaps into Charizard, and I'm starting to think that there is a possibility that I could lose this. However, because Greedent is really spammy and really tanky, it can easily take this Blast Burn and reach 2 more Body Slams. Now my opponent does mess up here and doesn't throw the Dragon Claw and lets me reach the 3rd Body Slam that takes out this Charizard. In comes Gliscor, and because shields are down, I'll be able to land this liquidation, and that will put him in a range where the Dragon Tail and the Breaking Swipe damage from my Steelix will be enough to take out the Gliscor. And one Earthquake is not going to be enough to take out Steelix. It'll put us in the yellow, but it only does like 60% of our health. That's how tanky Steelix is. This is kind of crazy. This Pokemon's a little bit OP. I don't know if it should have been buffed, but I shouldn't be complaining. I'm getting all these wins with it, right? Anyways, on to the next match. We see a Gliscor lead. I thought I was going to lose this match. I was like, that's it, no 5-0. I'm gonna have to wait until the next set to reach Veteran. But we see the Gliscor lead. I'm going to take the first Night Slash on Gliscor, and then I'm going to try to bait with Aerial Ace, and it gets a shield out of him. And then I tried to catch the next Night Slash on my Greedent, but it didn't work. Unfortunately, my opponent swapped out with all that energy, and then my opponent brought in Cobalion, and I was really thinking we were going to lose this, but watch what happens. My opponent attempts to farm me down, and I get a defense drop on the second crunch. Then I reach a 3rd crunch, and let's see how much damage it does. It's still not doing too much, but I reach a Body Slam. My opponent gets a little bit too greedy with trying to farm me down, and I did not think that this Body Slam would take him out, but it did. Now my opponent has a ton of energy on Gliscor, which is very scary, and my Gliscor is in Night Slash range, or almost in Night Slash range. So I bring in Steelix hoping he'll throw a move blindly, and he does. He throws a Night Slash. But on the next move he reaches, he decides to bait with Night Slash, and he successfully takes one of my shields. Then my opponent swaps into Ampharos, and my opponent doesn't build up to the Focus Blast, so I know that I can easily no-shield this, that this is just a Brutal Swing, and I'm going to go straight for the Earthquake. However, my opponent decided to shield there. I thought he might not shield, that there would be a chance he wouldn't shield. Maybe he would think I was baiting, or maybe he'd save the shield for Gliscor. But it's okay because I managed to reach a second Earthquake, and we take out the Ampharos, the biggest threat to our Gliscor. Now what I'm going to do is, I have a shield left, but I'm going to let Steelix go because I have energy stored up on Gliscor, and I felt like saving the shield for Gliscor was a safer move because liquidation could definitely take out Gliscor, whereas I wasn't sure if a Breaking Swipe would be enough to take out the Gliscor. But finally, moving on to the last match of the set, we get Gliscor into Drapion. This is not a great lead for me, so what I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to build up to 5, and then I catch the crunch on Greedent. I'm hoping for no debuffs, but unfortunately our defense drops here. Now I'm just going to go for these Body Slams and spam as much as I can at this Drapion, and it's not going to be taking them well. This Drapion is Shadow, so it's not the most bulky. I can take another crunch, however, so I choose not to shield that crunch. And then my opponent brings in this new fire type that I can't pronounce its name. I think it's Skeledirge? I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I'm going to mispronounce it. I'm not even going to try. But Greedent is actually a very hard counter to this thing because this is Fire and Ghost type, and Greedent has Crunch. And the Shadow Balls are going to be doing nothing to Greedent. So I managed to land a crunch on this Pokemon from Greedent, and then this Pokemon unfortunately farmed me down with Incinerate. So it had quite a bit of energy to throw at Gliscor when I brought it back in, but my plan was to double shield Gliscor if my opponent did get to 2 Shadow Balls. Now I just have to go for the Aerial Aces because it's in a range where Aerial Ace and the Shadow Claws from Gliscor would be enough to KO. However, my opponent decides to invest both shields to save his Skeledirge. I don't know how to pronounce it again. I don't know what it's called. But yeah, he saved it, and then he swapped back out into Drapion for some reason, and now I can align my Steelix to his Drapion. And at this point, I still had no clue what could be in the back. I've never really seen this type of team composition before, so it was new to me. And I was just hoping that whatever it was, whatever tiny amount of health I had left on Steelix, it would be enough to deal with what my opponent had in the back. Lucky for us, it is Giratina altered, so both the Pokemon I have left can deal with it pretty well. And I was expecting my opponent to go for a catch on the low HP Skeledirge in the back. I used it as a chance to swap out of my Steelix and save all the energy I had and clear the debuff because its defense had been dropped from the Drapion matchup. And this gave me a better chance of surviving a Shadow Sneak from this Giratina. Now we are fortunate also that this Giratina is not running Ancient Power. That means I can stay in this matchup with the Gliscor as long as possible. And I almost took him out with this Pokemon alone. And now the Giratina is not going to have enough energy for a Shadow Sneak. He's just going to go for a Dragon Claw, and we CMP tied there, so I'm going to be able to get this Breaking Swipe off, and we're going to be able to take that final win, giving us a 5-0 in this set, and it's going to be just enough to push me over 2500 and into Veteran. Thank you guys so much for watching my video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you guys found it informative. If you use this team, do let me know if it works out for you. I think it will. I really think it's one of the strongest teams in the meta right now. And if you like my videos, please consider subscribing, maybe leaving a like, leave some comments down below. It helps me out a ton. And thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye!